Right.
All right, folks, thanks very much for your patience, and very happy Election Day for all of you here in the US. We have a very special Election Day panel here to reboot our Tech4Dem series. As those of you who've been around for a while know, the ICT team hosts on a regular basis talks with groups or individuals who are doing interesting stuff with technology. What we want to try and do is put a little different spin on it this year when we're working in the series, to try and integrate it more with the actual programming that we do here at NDI rather than making it too disconnected from our daily work. And so we've got a great group here today. We've got Nina from the Eurasia team, who works with our Belarus field office and various other places in Eurasia to do various organizing techniques with our different political partners. We've got Nikki and Mike Moschella from Nation Builder, which will be doing our main presentation today. Nation Builder, they'll tell you all about it, but it's super slick, very powerful online organizing tool. And then we've got Nick Benson from our political parties team, who can talk about the use of technology in political organizing and just basic organizing concepts. So just to get things rolling, this is something that's always been very important to me, that I've always cared a lot about from my time as a political organizer. And the challenge that we face for many of our partners around the world is that they haven't yet had the opportunity to see the power of using lists. It's not necessarily about shiny technology. Really, the most important thing is just the idea of having a list of names of your people, supporters, volunteers, voters, whatever it might be, and then using that list to target things and use your scarce time, money, and resources effectively. Nation Builder is a great example of an online organizing toolkit. The ICT team this year launched a suite of tools called Dem Tools, which some of you have heard us talk about before. We have one in there called Civic Party, which is a very basic, rudimentary online organizing toolkit. So we think of that as in some ways like the Fisher-Price version of online data management for parties or campaigns. Nation Builder then for organizations who are more sophisticated and able to take those lessons up to the next level. So without any further ado here, I'll kick it off to the gang over here. We're experimenting with microphones to try and make it easier for our friends in the field to actually pick up the things that we say. So I apologize for any technical glitches that may happen, and there's going to be some mic passing that goes on here. So thanks very much, guys. And
who's moderating this? Who's up first?
Turn off your mic if you're not using it.
who wanted to get started? Nina, were you going to get started?
Oh, dude, I don't.
Okay, then Nick, can you
Sure.
get started?
I'll go ahead. I guess, yeah. I just got a quick introduction, just to put this in the context of our programs and our programming in the field. I think that a lot of the times when we're talking to our partners in the field, the sort of parties we work with in MENA and CEE, SIWA, the word data and sort of data management can be intimidating, and immediately they sort of think about micro-targeting and modeling and all the really sort of complicated stuff that you read about the Obama campaign having done in the papers and so on. But the reality is that what we're talking about is a lot simpler than that, and all we're talking about is information. Politics has always been about information. It's about, as a party or as a candidate, understanding what people want and acting on that and getting your information out. As far back as the 1890s, there was a sort of perennial presidential candidate called Williams Jennings Bryan. He never won, but he was a congressman in Nebraska, and he used to keep an index file, sort of a cabinet with letters from his constituents, where he would just identify what they cared about, and he would use that information to inform his letter writing campaigns with them. And the reality is that what we're doing now is a lot more sophisticated, but it's not really any different. So when it comes to data and campaigns, what we're talking about boils down to three things. Gathering information about what people want, coming up with some kind of a response, and getting that information back out to the people we want to talk to. That response could be a campaign message, it could be a policy, it could be a platform, it could be a lot of things, but ultimately it's some kind of a response. Obviously that's an oversimplification, and each of those steps can be broken out into a dozen sub-steps. But at its core, that's what we're talking about. All that's changed is the scale and the quality of the information that we have. So what does that mean for NDI programs? So I read probably about half of the proposals we write. And the most common problems that we identify are almost always related to parties' inability to identify and respond to what citizens care about. So yesterday I spent about 5 minutes. I just went to the K Drive, which is, for those of you who aren't at NDI, where we keep our proposals. And I just pulled out some random party proposals. And here are some of the problems, which I pulled kind of more or less at random. Limited capacity of party branches to articulate policies that respond to local concerns. Party structures lack the capacity to engage their constituents. Parties lack tools and knowledge to organize around policies and respond to the needs, citizen needs rather than around personalities. And parties miss important opportunities to engage with their constituents. So basically there aren't many parties that we work with that couldn't do a better job gathering information about their constituents and about voters and about what people care about, and taking some kind of an extra effort, making some kind of an effort to respond to those. I'll let Nikki tell you more about what Nation Builder does and doesn't do. But in terms of our programs outlining those types of problems, the first step is always information. And maybe some of our partners are ready for the Cadillac version, which is kind of what Nation Builder really is. Maybe some of them aren't, and maybe some of them just need a Google sheet. Maybe some of them need an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe some of them need the Dem tool, and maybe it's just about sort of getting one constituent office up and running and keeping track of what people are talking to them about and figuring out a way to funnel that information out so that the party structure can come up with a response. And with that, I'll pass it off.
Yeah, I think. No,
To you,
go for
to you,
it.
to me, to you.
Let's let Nina go here, and
Okay.
she can provide a little bit of context on one particular NDI program that has been using information for organizing, and then you guys can take away for the main presentation.
Cool. So as Chris said, I work on Belarus and Russia, and my mic is not on, so I'm going to turn it on. Can you hear me now? All right. So for those of you who don't know much about Belarus, you might know one thing, which is that Belarus is often referred to as the last dictatorship in Europe. Alexander Lukashenko has been in power for over 20 years now, and as a result, he's pretty much stamped out opposition politics. Any politicking is pretty much illegal. Parties can't get registered, political agitation is difficult, and there's a lot of arrests made very frequently. For things that are non-political, people can hand out flyers on issue-based things and just get arrested. So, as a result, there's a high risk to conducting voter outreach and even to associating with those conducting voter outreach, which presents a problem for Belarusian parties who do not have any access to any sort of public voter file as parties in the United States or more advanced democracies do. If you would even call Belarus a democracy, I don't think we would. So parties are starting from square one to cobble together any sort of data that they can. And they do this through membership information, as well as what I like to call DIY data sets, which they put together through door knocks, meetings, any other types of pickets or voter outreach that is kind of face-to-face. Phone banks are like a new thing in Belarus, just to kind of give you an idea. And they've been collecting data this way since 2002 and had been using until NDI came along, very rudimentary storage methods. The high end of that would be an Excel spreadsheet, the low end would be piles of papers. And no matter which they were using, this data wasn't really getting utilized in any sort of capacity. Parties were collecting data at both the national and local levels and not communicating with one another. So national activists would go out to the regions, collect data on folks in Gomel and not give it to their Gomel party branch. So there was a lot of misuse or unuse of data. And overall, just a lack of communication, information sharing, and data usage. So with help from the ICT team and funding from DRL, we developed two tools that were customized in consultation with parties. And this was in order to create a streamlined and secure mechanism for collecting, sharing, and utilizing voter data. So the first was the online, and you're calling it Civi Party. We just call it Civi CRM database that supports political organizing and targeting of voters. And then we paired this with Tails, which I'm sure Chris can describe much more eloquently. To me, this is just a way that our Belarusians can remotely access the server that their database is stored on without the Belarusian KGB getting involved. So together, these tools constituted a system that basically met the needs of Belarusian political activists, in addition to keeping them secure. So throughout the 2 years of the project, a number of our parties showed rapid progress in making the CiviCRM database part of their routine. And collectively, over the past 2 years, the parties have collected data on approximately 5% of the voting population in Belarus, which may not seem like a lot, but when you're starting from zero, it's pretty damn good. Most importantly, the introduction of the CiviCRM database has changed party attitudes towards strategic data collection and usage. So just to give you an idea, now the way that CiviCRM is being used by the parties, they see database usage as among their core strategic goals. They're trying to reinforce their own structure and work more with their memberships in the regions in order to improve communications with supporters. And they want to do this not only in election periods in Belarus. We're coming up on a presidential election cycle followed immediately by a parliamentary election cycle. But since they don't have any real hopes of ever getting into parliament or especially getting a presidential candidate elected in the near future, it's really important that they recontact supporters. So their database helps them do that strategically. And now they're collecting data on a more regular basis. That kind of goes along with what I was just saying. They're updating their voter files, which is really important and encourages them to recontact supporters over and over again to keep their information current. And as I was saying before, they've started to use phone banking now. So this is kind of a cultural thing for Eurasia. A lot of people don't want to give out their phone numbers. They already think the government knows too much about them, and they don't want to be guilty by association with Belarusian opposition parties. So the fact that they're able to get this information from their supporters is a huge step in the right direction in terms of kind of encouraging the political cycle of engagement that we know here. And now we're looking even at email blasts, which is very exciting. And some of our more energetic parties have figured out ways of cross-listing their database with their social networks, which in Belarus is the networks like Vkontakte and Contact, which is like the Belarusian version of Facebook, or the Russian language speaking version of Facebook. So they're building more effective citizen profiles and improving engagement that way. Anyway, that is the very broad picture of how we use Civi in Belarus, and we're looking at doing the same thing in Russia now. Thank you.
That is awesome. A lot of the problems that you both laid out, I think we can do a tremendous amount to solve very quickly and very easily. And so we want to show you that today. My name is Mike Moschella, and I'm Vice President of Nation Builder. And it's awesome to be here because, as Chris knows, I actually worked in foreign policy and national security from 2008 to 2012 as chief organizer of a leadership development institute called the Truman National Security Project. And actually one of the main reasons I went to Nation Builder after the 2012 election cycle was that working with folks who had who were working on the same types of democracy and civil society building efforts abroad, I would get calls a lot, being kind of like the political guy with a background in campaigns and data and organizing. And those calls would come from people in foreign parties, and they'd say, we want to do what Obama does. And I'd say, that's great, but you can't do what Obama does for a couple of reasons. You don't have the money to, you don't have the people, you don't have the training, but more importantly, what Obama does is actually knock on doors and call landlines. And it's really hard for you to knock on doors in Tunisia, and you can't call in any landlines in Belarus, so you're kind of SOL. However, there have been huge increases and huge efforts to solve some of these gaps in how we identify people, how we communicate with people, and how we build communities. And at Nation Builder, our goal as a technology platform is to be able to bring all of the ways that we can learn about people and communicate to people under one roof. I kind of think of the way that we organize as historically it's kind of like tents in a battlefield. And there's like social media in one tent, and then you have like a voter file, and that's another tent, and then you have an email system and a website, and then like it's basically like you live in a tent, but you always have to go to the outhouse, and it gets really annoying. Right? And so I kind of think of Nation Builder in one way as, imagine you put all these tents under one roof and then built actual walls and then had plumbing and electricity and connected everything. What you'd end up with is a system that has kind of all the core tools of community organizing in one place. So website and all the tools that people use to engage online, like events, petitions, surveys, whatever you need to do, volunteering and donating. You'd have another room that would be your data tools. So how do we know who did what? You'd have another room that's your social media. So somebody talked about us on Facebook or joined our Twitter, and we want to know that in our database. We'd have another room that's a communication system. And that room would have a lot of good furniture in it. It wouldn't just be email, it would actually be text and canvassing and phone banking, all the things that we would use to talk to folks in 2014. And then you'd have another room that were finances, the ability to be self-sustaining. And so in essence, what we do at Nation Builders is build all that platform. And really, since putting the product that you will see today on the market in February of last year, we've expanded into now 58 countries, which is awesome, and a little over 8,000 campaigns running on Nation Builder, many of whom will be, hopefully, knock on Formica, elected today, which is great. In part, in doing that, one of the ways that we've done that is by bringing on some really awesomely talented people with foreign policy and development backgrounds, like Nikki, who came over she was an innovation advisor for USAID, and I said, why don't you come and live in Los Angeles where it's sunny all day and not have any bureaucratic people in your way? And so for some reason Nikki thought that was a compelling thing. And so I've given Nikki a little challenge, which is like, how could we actually go into a new place and create a campaign out of scratch and find a bunch of people who are willing to engage and find a bunch of leaders and then create a whole political infrastructure from scratch in, say, like 30 minutes of work. So that's what Nikki did, and she's going to show us how she did that using Nation Builder. And oh, you already have a mic.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. I'll give the mic back to Nick, and I'll shut up, and I'm just going to go click things on the computer in the back. Cool?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Uh-oh.
All right. I think we're good. Hey guys, it's good to be with you here today. As Mike mentioned, I kind of have a background working with USAID and internationally in a lot of different capacities. Part of what I was doing originally was kind of in post-conflict areas, so I did a lot of governance work in Afghanistan and Iraq, and then kind of switched over to innovation programming and ICT for D stuff. So this is kind of a convergence of all the different things that I was doing.
Yeah, entertainingly, we do need your password.
So this is fun. It's Tunisia. I'm obviously going to change it after this. So the capital T.
Not capital T.
That should get us in.
There we go.
You know, fun tip, passwords, places you want to go.
It's the first time
Good
Tunisia
way to
has ever
remember.
worked.
Cool. So what we tried to do here, we wanted to just like walk you guys through what it could look like to have something up and running, how you could get a flow for organizing and a really quick like snapshot view. So basically what we were thinking is a scenario where you're dropped into a place. Let's just pretend I've never been to DC before. I'm from LA now. I've adapted to the sunshine and I'm coming back. I know nothing about what's going on with the mayoral race. What we wanted to do was get something up and running as quick as we could and get some data sets to like understand who our people were, where we could start playing. So basically in about 20 minutes last night, this is what I did. I started out, I built a basic like web presence you can see here. This is like what you can get out of the box. You really like create this in 10 minutes. So you have some basic things here. You can see there's action pages, you can kind of get involved, there's calendars, there's volunteering. Not all like accumulates in an amazing backend, which we're going to show you where the power of the data is. So Mike has us on a get involved option here. We can get people to sign up and start collecting their data in minutes right after you create it. But what we want to start with here is hop over into the control panel, and it should be the tab to the left.
We're a little
Oh, we're a little slow at the moment.
slow in the intro.
All right. So as we're transitioning, we're gonna kind of hop into what you're gonna see is like the back end of Nation Builder. That's where the power lives of where you can create and control the pages that you see. That's where you can see all the data living in one place. That's where you can actually like control the finances, the communication tools, all that. So we were on a donation page here. You see like another element of the out of the box kind of option for building your campaign. We got kicked out, starting over again. But the essence of what I'm trying to do here was get a lay of the land. So coming into a new place, you don't necessarily know what you have starting. So what I did is I went in and looked at the top mayoral candidates and I pulled in all their Twitter followers. So I did a really quick search. I pulled in all those people. We got about 12,000 people just right off the bat, and all of their social media information pulling into Nation Builder, which is amazing as like a starting point of data. So once you have that information, you can start doing like a couple of really cool, critical things. You can start segmenting that data and identifying certain people that are influencers in the areas that you're interested in and starting to figure out who your leaders are and empowering them. So what we got here, we did, if my click's on the little funnel, we did a little search based on our Twitter followers that we brought in. We wanted to see all of our international do-gooders, the people who are interested in foreign policy, development, human rights. So we searched a bunch of keywords up here on the top, one by one, added them into this little search, and we went through actually all of the Twitter bios of these people. So these folks come in like immediately. They came into my nation. I had 12,000 people. I ran this search. We have like our top 130, I think we have up here, folks, 170, that came up with interest areas in this. So what you can do now, you have like a starting point of people who are like in the areas that you kind of want to focus on. You can basically sort these guys by social influence. So you can either look at their clout score, you can look at their number of Twitter followers, and you can identify like who are the top people that you really want to like build those relationships with and build out your leadership team. So what you can do here is up on the top, if we look at some of the folks who are of the most influential. So we see like Jerry here had a clout score of 67. That's great to know for us, and we might want to engage with her directly. So we can send a direct tweet straight from Nation Builder and actually reach out to her and engage her, invite her to an event that we're doing that I just created on the website I made last night. So you have that capability right off the bat. You can go ahead and send a direct tweet or an email blast, like whatever your fancy is, and go ahead and invite them. You can see all these fun people. We got Pharrell up here, we got Ivanka Trump. You never know who you're gonna get who's interested in the areas. This is great. So we want to pick a few folks that are really important for us, basically invite them to this event to bring leaders together in a particular area. We want to get to know them, engage them, and Mike can like send them to right here. We're up on their Twitter directly. We can send them the invite, the link to our RSVP, and folks can actually sign up directly through that. Or you also have the option of doing text keywords, which can be super awesome. One of the things that you can do on like all of your action pages are allow people, rather than like straight going to the website, you can have people like text in to a certain number and their RSVP goes straight in. I don't know if we still can access the event page, but there we go. So here is our calendar of events. We must be searching a little too close. Well, as it's thinking, basically we can have folks, there we go, we got our calendar. We've got a couple events on the docket here. Some folks might want to come to the election watch party. We have some happy hours, some barbecues, a lot of celebratory events this week. So maybe we want folks to come directly to this page and RSVP, drop in all their information. Or we can use this text keyword. If anybody has their phone in here, you can try it out. It's super easy. All you need to do is text WIN to, if folks can see this, I can read it out for you too. It's 858-877-9129. And you'll automatically be signed up for the event. And so that information is being captured in Nation Builder, so it's building on all the data you already have in your nation, and folks are gonna start to converge based on different pieces of info you have based on them. So whether you have like email or phone number or social media, that data will start to converge over time. So folks can automatically RSVP this way. So if we go back into the control panel, now we can add this guy in as
as an attendee for the event, which is super great. And that person's gonna start getting social capital points. That's something in Nation Builder which allows you to like track who are your most engaged members. And you can kind of configure that any way you want. It can be, you know, a combination of donations and events or volunteer management, like anything that you think is important is a way to like track leadership. And that person can start getting points and track over time. You can have a leaderboard, you can even have like a little competition, gamify the process externally or just among your leadership team internally. And that way you can start to figure out like who are the people that you need to empower and give access to go manage their own teams. How do we splinter off into little organizing communities and have those people be empowered with their own tool sets? Yeah, so we got Kevin up here. Kevin's got some social capital. He hasn't quite beat me to the top, but maybe over time he'll make it. There we go, we got Chris. So everybody has a profile like this in Nation Builder, and all of their data is going to be aggregated here, you know, over time, and you're going to be able to see that history, share that with your team.
So I just sent that in right now.
Yeah, it's awesome. So he's in our nation. So you captured those folks right off the bat. What else are you looking at here, Mike?
Just people who RSVP'd here.
Yeah, so we can get a list of everyone coming to your event. You can look at that like at any stage, basically see like where things are at. But the idea is you come into a new place, you don't really have anything to start with. You can start pulling data instantly from social media as a starting point, and then you can start integrating that with all the other pieces of data that you have over time to start empowering your folks to actually give people tools to organize, to be really effective at that, and sharing it amongst your team. And you can give them all like permission sets to access it on their own as well. So we got, oh, my friend Lauren, she's in here. We want Lauren to be a precinct captain. So there we go, our whole team knows. We're gonna go in and actually switch up her permission set, I think, and give her some power to do things with Nation Builder. So not only do like a few people at the top only get access to the data, you can empower as many people on your organizing team as you want. You can go as far out with as many access levels as you need. So that can be a helpful way to segment the data. If you're thinking about party building, if it's beyond just, you know, a single campaign, you can have like different tiered access for folks in that structure too. So here we go. Lauren's got a permission set. Now she can log in. She can see a certain layer of the data within Nation Builder that she is empowered to look at. And you can replicate this same kind of process with a lot of different other types of action pages. So this was just an event. You can do it with volunteer pages. You can do it with donations, with petitions. Here we go. We got an external leaderboard up here. All of our folks who've earned the most social capital. We really want to engage those people. Maybe they all need to be volunteer captains. So yeah, that's just a little look at one way you can kind of slice the cake here and start building some data infrastructure in like the very initial stages at like, you know, in any new city, you can instantly pull all that in. So.
And what's neat, you know, what I want to point out about that flow, what's neat is, Nikki, how much work did you put into identifying these folks and setting this up?
Totally, it was like literally only 27 minutes. It's not hard to do at all. You throw it up, you pull them in, the data pulls, it's automated for you.
Including like having a donate page and a volunteer page and blog comment. And then how much would it actually cost per month for you to be building democracy in this strange land that you've been sent to called Washington, D.C., where they have strange guard and strange customs.
I think they might use dollars here.
Yeah, how many dollars a month would be like I think you had 28,000 people that you had pulled in to your nation from the entirety of everybody who had engaged on the mayorals. How much of that?
It's about $50.
That would be 50.
Yeah.
Cool. So, basically the process that happens when you can kind of combine technology and create, you know, much more powerful systems becomes one, stronger, but two, much more efficient, and ends up actually creating leadership. So what we're doing here is we're getting the website up online in a way that it takes Nikki, who doesn't know how to code, a few minutes. Secondly, now we're identifying people who we didn't know before. We want to find people who care about foreign policy, who have engaged in Washington, D.C. And this could happen in any place where there's social media. You could actually grab this. Now we're talking directly to people in a way that we know is very effective. In fact, a recent Columbia University study talked about how effective just the tactic that Nikki was using, which is tweeting directly at people, was in getting people to engage. We are targeting them for a particular thing. It took 30 seconds for me to build that target of all the people who supported Muriel Bowser for mayor and cared about human rights and democracy and international things, right? Then I'm grabbing the fact that they did something, they joined the event, and I'm actually scoring them because of that. And now I know that, you know, Kevin and Nikki and Lauren and Chris are all people that are engagers. And what I can then do, because I know these people are leaders, is bring them into a leadership pathway within Nation Builder where I'm going to give them permission sets. I'm going to turn this over to them so that when I leave this strange land of Washington, D.C., go back to a place with far greater civilization, Los Angeles, that they'll be on the pathway to becoming tan and handsome, cultured like we are. And we're basically doing this for a few bucks, right? And that's what I love about, like, you know, kind of organizing technology. Really, our mission as a company is to help as many people do this for as low cost as possible, so that more people can create what they were meant to create at the end of the day. There's a lot there that we showed you. There's a lot of neat things that we didn't show you, and so I feel like there's probably like questions, thoughts, ideas, and ultimately it's most fun for us to kick around some cool ideas that all you have. Maybe see some of them come to life. So I'll turn it back to moderators.
Great. All right, well, thanks a lot, guys. Fascinating. It's a super powerful and interesting system, and it's, I think, something the Nation Builder does better than anything else I've seen is the social integration. And in many of the places in which we operate, even if internet penetration is limited, internet is synonymous with Facebook, and in some places, Twitter is becoming more popular as well. So that sort of integration is very, very powerful and useful for our partners. So yeah, we'll just open it up for questions now. We've got a great set of people between the practical and programmatic and then the more technical. So fire away with anything you've got.
I'm just curious, in terms of Nation Builder's client base, does Nation Builder have significant overseas clients?
Yeah, so from like very, you know, small efforts in like Pakistan and India and Malaysia to entire political parties, the British Labour Party, the Australian Labour Party, and even some starting up in some more developing countries. The Minister of Youth and Sports in Malaysia, which is a really big thing in Malaysia. We're in 58 countries now, in all regions of the world. And we, the websites inherently support any left or right language, and with a little bit of coding on the design side. These are all like Nikki used a template. They're all customizable and can support other character sets too. The back-end control panel that we showed you, we can do in a couple of languages now, and we're working very steadily to get it into as many as possible. And with particularly large efforts, we can work out with enough advance time moving the control panel itself into a different language too.
So if I understand correctly, you rolled this out in February, you said?
Yeah, the control panel that you're seeing with all the social integration came out last February of 2013.
So this is the first cycle that it's really being used?
Yeah.
And what is some of the feedback you're getting in terms of usability, ease of use? I know it took you 10 minutes, but I guarantee it would not take me 10 minutes. I'm just curious what some of the suggestions for improvement are and how we can kind of think about that in the international context.
Yeah, so typically the big challenge internationally is around financial gateways. So what we're doing right now is moving from syncing to all the things in the Western world, like Stripe and PayPal and Democracy Engine and you know that suite of things that just pop right into Nation Builder, and we're blowing that up. On the usability front, like, really, I mean, Nikki and I don't know any coding. So we typically will do like a half an hour to an hour long onboarding for any new control panel user who wants it. And that's almost always completely sufficient for people doing basic stuff. We have 78-year-old grandmas who are doing efforts to build a playground at their school, and they need to get online, who learn this stuff in a half an hour. We also have built an expert certification for folks who are going to like dive a little bit deeper, and that can be done all online. We have folks on staff who actually kind of coach people who want to learn, how to set up more advanced data stuff. But literally all that Nikki did to pull in all that data was this is the actual sequence of clicks. She clicked people, and then she clicked import, and then she clicked recurring import, and then she typed in the Twitter handles, and then hit enter. And then waited like a couple hours for Twitter, and then all those profiles were created. That was it. It was a sequence of 4 or 5 clicks that are pretty, like if you were trying to figure out how to import something, you'd probably go to people and then click import. So we are working like super hard to make it like almost dunce-proof. Anyone here, by virtue of working at NDI, I guarantee you figure it out pretty quickly.
And in any of the countries where social media is less pervasive, what kind of feedback are you getting?
So we integrate and can connect records seamlessly in a couple ways, and it's worthwhile starting that way. Twitter, we can grab pretty much everything. We can grab when people follow you, when they tweet at you. We can even take other people's accounts that you don't have access to, like Nikki did, and pull in all of your thousands of followers. So Twitter's, they're the best. Second is Facebook. So Facebook, if you connect an account, we can grab things like people that post comments, the comments they say, shares on Facebook. And we can grab the fact that they have a profile if you have their email, and we, like, even if they don't follow you, we'll still know that they have a Facebook effort and be able to click to Facebook. So Facebook, what we can't get is we can't just like wholesale import other people's Facebooks like we can with Twitter. But what you could do if you have a country that's heavily on Facebook, like say for example, some Eastern European countries where literally everyone is on Facebook, you could set up any number of events or pages and connect them and grab people's comments as they're posting. Like let's say you wanted to stand up a democracy effort in a place that had a lot of communists. You might set up the pro-democracy page, and everybody who engaged on that would get tagged as pro-democracy, and then you might set up a pro-communist page, and everybody who engaged on that would get tagged as pro-communist, and then you would basically know the entirety of people who are like, especially in heavy Facebook, like Eastern European countries. You'd be able to figure it out really quickly. We also will pull in Clout, which is very American and has some issues, but is useful in some ways. And we'll pull in LinkedIn, which is nice. So most places have some sense of that. Like China obviously doesn't, but there's not really much nation builder in China for reasons that we probably don't need to go into. And then SMS is connected in too. Now SMS doesn't work in all countries, especially in Africa, because it's sort of dependent on the carriers and how the carriers work. Basically what we'll find is there's in almost every place on Earth, people are communicating, either by phones, Twitter, Facebook, SMS, or you go to their house. Like there's one of those things. So all of those things are built in. And when we're in places where people aren't communicating in those, like the trick is that you shouldn't be worrying about standing up nation builder. You should be worrying about figuring out how people can communicate. And then you're basically at a different stage in the process.
Now, Mike, could you or Nikki elaborate a little bit on what Nina was talking about as the DIY list problem? So in places where maybe there isn't the social access or nation builder isn't integrated, but you do have, say, a comprehensive spreadsheet of a couple 100,000 folks.
Yeah, Nikki, what would you do in that case?
Yeah, so if you already have a spreadsheet to start with, you can easily just dump all that data into Nation Builder and put your list as a starting point, and it will match to all the social media that it can. So you'll have that as much as you can, but you already have like a data repository for all your email addresses, and you can start directly email blasting those folks. So.
Yeah, we actually have built a services team too, so that if you're dealing with incredibly difficult data stuff, in the kind of trial period, we'll just do it for you half the time, because we found out that just doing it for folks, taking all the Google Docs and various Excel sheets and having staffers who are data experts load it all in took less of our time than if we messed it up and we had to clean it. So we will literally do the data imports for you. You just have to email Nikki all of the Excel sheets, and then they go to pro data people, and then they're in a communications and activation database for you.
Which is important to note for any of you thinking about this for your programs, anything like this for your programs. Nina's folks found that an initially scheduled half-day data import ended up becoming, I think, 3 separate sessions where people had to come in for multiple days to gather all these lists and clean them up and process them and so on. So it's a really hard initial hurdle to get over to get your information standardized and into a system like that.
And I would also add that it does require pretty much, I wouldn't say constant support, but regular support from our field team. We have a few staffers who are experts with Civi CRM, and they're in contact via Skype with our parties on a pretty regular basis in order to keep them accountable in going back and cleaning their data and staying on it.
It's like a good analogy is cars and mechanics. If you're gonna change the engine of your car, you should just give it to a mechanic to do. Unless you're like my girlfriend who's a geneticist who personally fixes everything in her car just for the point of figuring it out. It's like a fun puzzle for her. Me, I'm like, oil change, I better take this sucker in. So if you are an oil change, take the sucker in. We can do the oil change for you.
Yeah, something else worth mentioning is that we have an open API, so we're really open to and wanting to integrate with other systems. So if there are particular things in different countries that are more relevant or tools that people are already using, that's a conversation that we're excited to have with people. And kind of on the SMS front, we're talking with people like Frontline SMS and Bodo Mobile who have already tools in place on the ground in a lot of countries to make this stuff really easy. So that's definitely something we're trying to do more and more of.
Is there any way, going back to how Nick opened it, to pull in, for example, Twitter followers and sort of glean what might be their priorities, for example? Less on the contact side, but the policy side.
So it's interesting. So the difference between Nation Builder and just a social monitoring tool, right, is that the intent of Nation Builder is not just to get a sense of 85 people liked your thing and 47 people trashed you. Corporate marketing folks want to do, who's saying good things about J. Crew, right? That's not the intent. The intent for organizers is to leverage the fact that somebody is engaged or saying a thing to create a conversation that brings that person into your community and then perhaps even makes that person a leader that you can go and train and now you've created civic society. So what we're able to do is we're able to kind of seed entire data systems with the conversations that are taking place. And then in order to identify that somebody is particularly valuable, you have a couple of tools. One is to see that people are retweeting or engaging or taking action. We didn't show you that, but you can say, who retweeted us within a date range? So those folks are raising their hand saying, I want to have a conversation with you, and you should have a conversation back. In almost all other databases, you missed that conversation, or you have to catch it in another way. You're in a different tent. You're not in the house, right? The second thing that we have is what we showed you a little bit of, which is the keyword biosearch. So most people will self-identify in ways that are very, very salient. Going back to Chris's initial thing about lists, right? I love probably 4 inanimate things in life. I love lists, maps, Boston sports and whiskey. And in my bio, if you were to look at it, like you would find that I'm a Boston sports fan. And if you're trying to find Boston sports fans, you're going to get it. And then what will happen is, as you start organizing, if we can find half the Boston sports fans, or if we can find all those people that care about human rights so much they put human rights in their bio, you'll end up finding all the rest of them, right? Because they're all connected and intertwined. And that human rights person that comes to the event is then going to go and invite a couple other human rights. And you'll end up knowing them all, and you know that you targeted human rights people for that event, and you can tag them all with human rights later on, right? But the systems exist not magically, but with a little bit of elbow grease, some smarts, and like a good organizing philosophy, you're able to do it really, really well. There isn't so much of a magic button of just like monitoring, oh, here's all the people that care about world peace in the world.
To add on, if you are interested for any of your programs on more of that social media sentiment analysis sort of piece, the ICT team has access to a system called Crimson Hexagon, which can be used for that type of analysis of Twitter, social media blogs, and so on, to see what the more policy-driven conversations might be.
The other thing, just to piggyback a little bit, is that oftentimes these systems, it's not necessarily that you're going to be able to sort of take your district and say, and plug it into Nation Builder and say, oh, people in this district care about education, right? What you might be able to do then, which is I think what you were asking, and that would be something that Crimson Hexagon would be great for, but this also gives you a starting point for talking to people, because ultimately campaigns happen at doors and campaigns happen on phones and they happen in face-to-face interactions, and this gives you a starting point for figuring out who you need to talk to, targeting them, talking to them, finding out what they care about, and then capturing that information in a way that's usable later. Because then you can capture that information, you can use it to, you would probably have more on this than I would. You can use it for mail lists, you can use it for email lists, you can use it for social media, not to sort of get on the old school mail, but it still works.
I mean, that's a crucial point, right? Nick, is that here even in the United States, right? We didn't build democracy in a minute. Paul Revere had to go and ride town by town, right? And sometimes you guys and the folks in the field are going to have to do the equivalent, right? You have to go and ride town by town, and you're going to have to go find each educator and find the influencers, and we can give you lots of shortcuts to do it. But at the end of the day, the data system makes everything expedient, right? It makes it so that nothing gets lost. It makes it so that you can find leaders and build infrastructure. It doesn't replace what actually organizing is, which is that person who cares about democracy going town by town and school by school. That's the work that really you guys are doing, and our job is just to provide you with tools to make your lives easier and make you more effective at doing that work.
So to give you an example of that expediency, back in 2004 when I was organizing, we were talking about this, I was organizing in Miami, and we actually had to use Excel macros to upload our data into a system called Leverage, which I don't think exists anymore. And if you got one line wrong, your entire sheet for the day was just a mess, and you had to go back and do it all over. So that meant that all of the volunteers that you had knocking on doors, all the little old ladies that sitting in my office making phone calls all day, all that data was lost, right? Because of one sort of mistake in one line. And now, sort of with tools like this and others, you can just capture it so much better in a way that's so much more efficient, and it saves you time, so you're not going back to those same people over and over again, trying to figure out what you already knew, or what you should have already known. It also helps you target the right people, sort of at the beginning, so you're not calling, I don't know if you guys are familiar with 1s through 5s, but so you're not calling one of your 5s all the time. Or all the time.
It's funny that you mentioned deceased. We actually had a whole chain of British mortuaries that were like really interested in using Nation Builder because they could have data on who's deceased. Right? Well, this is a sales tool. We'll get them right away. Anyhow.
Lightweight for use case.
So we're at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, any last questions? Okay. Great. All right, guys, Mike, Nikki, thank you so much for coming. Nick and Nina, really appreciate it, and thank you all. So if you have questions going forward, please feel free to reach out to me directly or to Nick. We can get you hooked up with our friends at Nation Builder here. We can show off our free to use Civi Party system for anybody who's interested in it. A little bit of a more basic entry point. And look forward to continuing the conversation. So thank you all. Okay.